Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to Ad Hoc Tutorials video channel. In this Ad Hoc tutorial, I will show you how to set up and run multiple databases simultaneously in a single machine. Let's say you need a quick database to test some feature, or maybe you are developing multi-database application. Imagine how it's painful to separately install, for example, Oracle MSSQL. And in this tutorial, I will set up namely 5 databases: MySQL, Oracle, MSSQL, Microsoft SQL Server, PostgreSQL and MongoDB in a single machine with 3 GB of RAM using Docker approach, Docker technology. Docker is a container technology. It's like isolated operating system inside operating system which shares the host resources. What we need to have to set up multiple databases: first, we need operating system with Docker environment enabled. Docker is available for macOS, Linux, Windows hosts as well. In this tutorial, I'll run through the installation process in blank CentOS system virtual machine, and you will use the documentation to set up Docker in other operating systems. So we need blank CentOS installation. Let's start it. This is the version. As you can see, it's CentOS 7. If you do not have a CentOS virtual machine, you may check my other tutorial on how to set up CentOS into VMware Workstation Player. Additionally, I will show you a Vagrant solution at the end that will install CentOS with enabled Docker environment for you automatically. So this is the blank CentOS. Let's start the installation process. The installation of Docker could be found here. There are installation instructions for every operating system. So mine is Linux, CentOS. First, we need to install older versions, if any. This command will install required packages for Docker to work. This will add the corresponding repository. Let's enable the repository CE nightly. These are options of the enabled repository. And finally, we'll install the Docker. There are other options if you want to install the specific version of Docker. Now let's start the Docker service. And additionally, add Docker to autoload. The service is up and running. There is another installation option directly from package. Next, we need to install Docker Compose. The documentation is here. Let's choose, my version is Linux. We'll download the stable release of Docker Compose. The version they might change later. And finally, let's make sure that it installs. So the installed version is 1.24.0. Well, now we have the CentOS machine with Docker environment enabled. Before we go to the database and Docker installation process, we'll disable SEL Linux. You need to set the SEL Linux to disabled. I already did it. Now we'll set up the 5 databases and run them up. First, we need to create the necessary folder structure. Let's run these commands. Also, we need to create a Docker Compose YAML file. So we will go to the newly created Docker folder and create a YAML file inside this folder. Let's take a quick look and let's run through the YAML file. Under the services section, we will define the service, the corresponding service for each database. For example, the first one is for MySQL, the version 8. Let's go to the official repository for Docker image. You may install different versions of MySQL. So here are the available options. I will use the 8. You may install the 7th version if you want. So here we define the service name. This is the image that will be used with the corresponding tag. image name plus tag. This is the container name. We'll name it MySQL underline P. P is for persistence. Persistence means that we will store the MySQL data inside the host as well. Docker is an isolated container. If we don't use persistence, all data will be lost if we destroy the corresponding container. To enable persistence, we map the folder from the host to the folder inside the container. This will define the root password. This is the port mapping. I will map 3309 port from host to the 3306 port inside the container. Look to the documentation. Here is the example YAML file. These are environment variables. In this section, it explains how to store the data and enable persistence, data persistence. I will define the other services, database services correspondingly. For example, I will define MySQL service container without persistence in the same machine, and I will use the 7th version. And the configuration for each image could be found in the official page. For example, this is Microsoft SQL Server, the available tags, the image name, and different configuration options. It needs at least 2 GB of RAM to run this Docker image. To install and use the Oracle Docker image, you need to accept the license terms and you need to have corresponding Docker account. You need to sign in and accept license terms by clicking proceed to checkout. Agree. You could use this Oracle Docker image inside your host, but before you will need to log in command line using Docker login command and filling your authorization details. Here I will define the seed and the memory, also port mapping, PostgreSQL image and configuration, and this is MongoDB. Let's return to our setup process. First, let's create Docker Compose YAML file inside Docker folder. Let's create MySQL configuration file. This is the sample MySQL configuration file. For example, the most configurable parameters, folder structure. This is YAML file. I will use the data folder inside each service folder for data persistence. Now if we check, for example, ls, so it's empty. Let's log in with our account. Finally, let's run this magical command. This command will look for YAML file by default. So it may take a longer time for the first time. So be patient for the first time. The list of my Docker images. The status is up. The RAM usage is 2.5 gigabytes, which is pretty cool. Let's test each database. I have downloaded the portable database clients. You may download HadeSQL. Here is the portable version. And you may need to install the OLE DB driver for SQL Server and C++ distributable package for PostgreSQL. So I have already downloaded them. Now we'll create the corresponding connections. Let's open the YAML file. MySQL is up and running. Let's create the test database. Let's create the second test database as well. We have tested MySQL, MSSQL and PostgreSQL to access MongoDB. Please download the RoboMongo application. Let's open the shell and check the version. And finally, let's use SQL Developer to access Oracle database instance. Well, as you can see, the 6 databases are up and running simultaneously, and this is amazing. Now I will show you how persistence works. First, let's check the folder structure. The data folder is not empty anymore because it has been synced with the Docker container. Here is the corresponding file of our newly created database. Now let's destroy all the containers. This command will remove all the containers. As you can see, the list is empty. The no start option will create the containers but will not start them. Status is created but not up. Let's start only MySQL containers. Let's return back to the SQL. Now if we reload the persistence container, as you can see, the testDB is here and is not deleted. Here the database has been gone because no persistence was specified. You will need this command if there are problems when creating the container. The status is failed. You will need to use the service name with Docker Compose and the container name with Docker comments. Now we are inside the MySQL persistence container. We have finalized the tutorial, and the bonus content I will show you how to set up CentOS with Docker environment enabled using Vagrant solution, Vagrant approach. So you will need to download and install Vagrant and VirtualBox. After installation, you will need to create a new folder and put inside this folder mainly two files, Vagrant file and bootstrap.sh. Vagrant file is a Vagrant configuration file. It will specify the details of the virtual machine you need to set up. Here is the list. Here we will specify the network configuration and the resources. And I will use a bootstrap.sh file to install the necessary software and utils. And this is the content of bootstrap.sh. Basically, here is the commands we have executed previously, and they are just copy pasted from the documentation. This is Vagrant file and bootstrap.sh file. Let's open command prompt here. This is git bash for Windows. You may download it from this resource. After we have specified the Vagrant file and bootstrap.sh, we just need to fire Vagrant app command to set up our virtual machine. It may take some time. And that's it. Our CentOS virtual machine with Docker environment enabled is already up and running in just minutes. Let's SSH into virtual machine using Vagrant SSH command. Vagrant has created virtual machine using Vagrant file, and here is the configuration details. You may change them if needed. When using Vagrant SSH command, it will SSH into virtual machine using Vagrant user. So let's change the user to root. Let's check if Docker is running. Well, that's great. Now we have the Docker activated CentOS. Now you need to repeat the steps from setup and run all databases section, steps 2 up to 5, and that's all. Well, this is the end of the tutorial. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.